Welcome to episode 45 of Rail Talk. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And John, I told you I had this shirt. I'm wearing it for you today, buddy. Yeah. And if you can't see it, if you're listening, it is a shirt of Lisa Left Eye Lopez from TLC's mugshot from when she burned down Andre Risen's house. And John, as we all know, is a major Lisa Left Eye Lopez fan. John.
I'm speechless, Joe. I mean, can you go back? Can I see her again? Because that's a freaking mugshot, and look how beautiful she looks. That's a mugshot, and
yep.
I mean, I wish I could get my good pick
glamour shot
to look.
Yes,
it's unbelievable. I almost forgot to say I'm Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable, and Joe, you'll notice that I am actually in my office and not in my usual home studio. We have water in our basement. Yes, I am a little squishy down below, as it's known in the plumber's terms.
Jesus. Way to start off the episode with a glaring image that none of us wanted. So, John, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been a very satisfying Triple Crown so far. Very satisfying results for the first two races to see Kenny McPeek and now Dwayne Lucas win the first two legs of the Triple Crown. Seize the Grey goes wire to wire in the Preakness on Saturday over a sloppy track. Lots to break down from this phenomenal story and race. First off, it's awesome to see Dwayne still killing it at 88 years old. He's, the trainer emeritus in racing. I mean, I guess it's not emeritus because emeritus is retired, but you know what I mean. He's the big cheese who doesn't necessarily win big races as often as he used to, but he can still get a good horse to a race and to produce a top effort. And we talked about it last week that, the assumption was that Imagination was going to clear from the outside post. And I was like, I don't know, these two Dwayne Lucas horses, you got to think he's going to want speed from at least one of them. And shout out to Jaime Torres, who popped out to the front. And Frankie Dettori, I love Frankie, but I don't know what exactly he was doing on Imagination, yanking him back, taking him way out into the track. Clearly was not comfortable. Now, he probably was not going to do any running anyway, but I just felt like that they were both, it was one of those races where they were both kind of looking at each other like, you go, no, you go, no, you go, you go. And eventually Jaime Torres went to the front and Seize the Grey 2 weeks after winning the Pat Day Mile at Churchill Downs, comes back and wins the Preakness for MyRacehorse, son of Arrogate. There's so many angles here to tackle. But, John, why don't you give me your first blush reaction to the Preakness?
Well, this is a feel-good story, and it's a feel-good story for a lot of reasons that we'll get into, Joe. But most of all, let's take a step back. And again, I hate that we have to have this counter and we have to have the statistic, but apparently every single horse that ran on Black-Eyed Susan and Preakness Day came home fine. Now, Just Steel, who is also a horse that is managed by the coach or trained by the coach, came back and was injured after running in the Preakness, but was able to come back on his own power and strength. And again, it's a shame that we have to have that out there, but it's great that there wasn't a major issue on the racetrack. And the racetrack was a little goofy that day, that weekend. It was sloppy, it was muddy, it was sealed, it was unsealed. I mean, there were a lot of things that were going on that could have made it, nail biting watching the race.
And soft turf too, really soft turf as well.
Soft turf, very good point. Yep. So I understand the that you have to have these races run on the surfaces that they're offered because they are such highly prestigious races. That being said, I was pleased that when all was said and done, the census was 100%. Everyone that went out came home. And again, hopefully that is a statistic that we don't talk about as much because it's just common. And it's just, that's the normal way of doing business. I was really pleased to see that 3 horses, and Joe, you brought this up actually, so I'm going to give you full credit. 3 horses that ran on Derby Day finished first, second, and third in the Preakness. Thus, at least for a very short sample, debunking the idea of horses can't come back on 2 weeks rest when there's other horses that are waiting in the wings to try to beat them and they're fresh. Seize the Grey ran on Derby Day, albeit in the Pat Day Mile, but won the Pat Day Mile. Mystic Dan obviously came back after a nail-biting win in the Kentucky Derby to finish second. And Catching Freedom came off the pace, and we talked about it last week. I really liked Catching Freedom, and you brought up an excellent point that I didn't think of, and that is there's no pace in here for him to come back at. And sure enough, that's actually what happened for the other horses in the race, other than Seize the Grey. Let's also talk about a little bit about the fact that, Vettori, I wasn't sure what he was doing on Imagination. I've heard various thoughts on it, whether, like you said, it was, you take the lead. No, I'll take the lead. No, you take the lead. And just waiting for somebody to kind of go, to, all the way to my thought was that it was Vettori giving kind of a military salute of letting that berth be there for Muth, who should have been there in the race. And for going into the first turn, that's what they were doing. They were giving him a salute, like, this is where you would have been, buddy. I'm sorry that you couldn't be here. And it was like an homage to his absent stablemate.
You're saying he was letting the ghost of Muth take the lead in the race?
Exactly, yep. To let him have the middle rail. And I was wondering, watching the race, if maybe that was the better part of the racetrack, because again, they had just unsealed it the race prior. So maybe they were trying to get an idea of like, hey, you don't want to be on the rail because it's too sticky down there, or too deep down there. You want to be in the middle of the racetrack. But apparently that wasn't it either. And again, it was Imagination's only race where he was off the board. So the horse is a good horse. It's just a question of, that day he wasn't himself, and it was the first time running in slop. First time running in front of that kind of a crowd. There's a myriad of reasons why maybe the horse didn't run that well. But it just wasn't his day, unfortunately. But it was Seize the Grey's day, which means it was like 2,600 people's day also.
Yeah. No, I mean, we're going to get into the MyRacehorse discussion, but this was clearly their biggest win yet for a horse that they own the entirety of. They obviously were a part of Authentic as well, but didn't own nearly as much. So there's a lot to be discussed. And we will discuss it about the MyRacehorse business model, whether it's good for racing or bad for racing, and everything in between. But I want to talk about Arrogate, because anybody who knows me knows he's one of my favorite horses that I've ever seen, probably top 3 for me all the time. He got off to a bit of a slow start as a stallion. I say that like kind of tongue in cheek, because if you don't bust out of the gate with $1 million sales purchases and 7 winners in your first month and a half, everyone's like, oh, what a bust. But he came on towards the end of his first crop racing, and you look at the 3 crops that he had. Unfortunately, he only had three crops before he tragically died. Secret Oath wins the Kentucky Oaks from his first crop. Arcangelo wins the Travers champion 3-year-old and the Belmont from his second crop. And now he's got Seize the Grey from his third crop. So I think we're going to learn as time goes on, and we're already learning, that it was a major, major loss for Arrogate not to be able to produce more horses, because he was so brilliant and so fast on the racetrack. He was bred beautifully that it just seemed impossible that he wasn't going to be a successful stallion. And it's tough to not have his horses going forward beyond this crop. Now, he will have a bunch of brood mares who are hopefully producing, stars and stallions in their own right. So there will be some kind of legacy for him. But to me, that was one of the things that, it was a little bittersweet for me. I love Arrogate, and I love seeing his horses do well, especially the gray horses that kind of look like him. But John, it's unfortunate. It makes me wish that we had gotten at least a few more years from him, because I think he was on his way to stamping himself as one of the top stallions in the world.
And Joe, here's the interesting thing for me is that we talk about how he had 3 crops. He only had 324 registered falls, which is like 1 year of Golden Pal, basically. I mean, it really, if you think about it, it was more of a standard book than it is like in this quote unquote modern day book where you have 240 mares bred to a popular stallion. So of the 320 or so foals that he had, which I'm considering really two foal crops, basically, he had 6 Grade 1 winners.
Wow.
6. Fun to Dream, Secret Oath, and Tell Me No Lies, who we pinhooked. We weren't smart enough to keep her. Arcangelo, Cave Rock, and now Seize the Grey. So he had 6 out of 300, which, quick math, is roughly 2% of all of his foals that were registered became Grade 1 winners. That's 3 times the historic average. 3 times the historic average. The average is like 0.8% of all foals win a Grade 1, and he had 3 times that number. So it really is even more extraordinary. You say, well, why weren't more people breeding to Arrogate? Well, because that farm in particular, caps, in essence, has a soft cap on the number of mares that they breed to them. And also, we forget that Sons of Unbridled Song weren't doing well as stallions. I mean, they really weren't for the most part. Unbridled Song had a plethora of great runners, and and a few of them that ended up standing at stud. But he was like a relatively dud compared to what his offspring did on the racetrack. He was a dud as a stallion. So people were cold on Arrogate, just as you said. They weren't selling. They weren't sale ringers. Or sale toppers when they were being offered. And there was even a cold period, if you were. I mean, you only had three crops. And there was a cold period where people were like, I'm off him because there's no good Sons of Unbridled Song that are standing, that are doing well. He's just going to be another dud. And there was a myriad of reasons, some true, some, fictitious, as to why he wasn't going to make it as a stallion. But now he's coming back, and I really believe that his daughters especially will be very well sought after, almost like the Secretariat daughters were sought after.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing is like Juddmonte had a ton of great fillies that they bred to him. They bought horses just to breed to him. I think of, what was it? Take Charge Paula or one of those horses.
Somebody from the Take Charge Indy family, yeah.
Yeah, so he had like a rock star like caliber entourage of mares.
I see what you did there, Joe. I see how you worked that in there.
To the breeding shed. So I think his legacy will live on. It's just unfortunate we only got a couple of crops from him. The other storylines, as you mentioned earlier, 2 weeks, 1, 2, 3 horses that came back in 2 weeks from the Derby ran 1, 2, 3. So it's one of those things where like there's two different schools of thought, and there's the school of thought that, you got to have everything perfect. You got to have the exact right, the horse has to have between 48 and 57 days and like 3.5 breezes and blah, blah, blah. And like, then there's the school of thought like Dwayne Lucas. Hey, the horse is doing well. Strike while the iron's hot. And let's put him back in a big race and then hopefully win. And it got him a Preakness win at 88 years old. So, and shout out to Kenny McPeak as well. Ran Mystic Dan. Mystic Dan, we haven't even mentioned, ran great. He ran awesome. Like there was no disgrace in losing that race over what I thought was a pretty speed favoring track. I thought he ran his heart out. And Kenny McPeak has now shipped him up to Saratoga. Yep. He hasn't made a decision yet, but he is at least under consideration to run in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. So shout out to the old school guys who don't need everything to be exactly perfect for their horses to go out and perform at a top level on the racetrack. And I do think it's inevitable that we're going to stretch out the spacing of the Triple Crown. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But it was great to have a throwback Preakness where horses that just ran came back and ran again and didn't disintegrate into dust. That was nice to see as well. Rail Talk is sponsored by The Green Group. The Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. There's one reason no other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len's got over 200 horses with DJ Stable. It's won over 2,500 races, and the Green Group's got close to 1,000 clients. We should have a counter on the screen when we do this spot. And just when we get to 1,000, we'll throw a party. But you guys got to be close. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk. Len's offering a complimentary confidential half-hour consultation guaranteeing you'll get value. Call him up at, what's that number again?
732-634-5100.
And do it soon so he can prove to you he'll save you taxes, or hit him up at greenco.com. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from this next satisfied customer, Mr. Joe Orsino.
Oh, my taxes, 35 years plus. I originally started training for them and then moved everything to them like 6 months later. Absolute best. I mean, it's just when you know they're overlooking your taxes, it's in their hands. They when I first started with them, my old accountant had made a terrible error, and I talked to Len about it, and he said, back then, 35 years ago, let us handle this. You handle your horses and your training. You worry about that. That's what you do. Let us do this. And you know what? And that's the relationship I've had with them since. I let them handle everything, and you don't have to worry at night. It takes a lot less worry out of the day when you can just do what you do best and let them do what they do best.
Len wants to emphasize the guarantee, unequivocally guarantees he'll find you value and savings. Hit them up at greenco.com or 732-634-5100. So the other major storyline coming out of the Preakness, and we touched on it at the beginning of the first segment, was MyRacehorse getting its first major coup for a horse that they own in entirety. Seize the Grey was a $300,000 Fasig-Tipton Saratoga graduate. Shout out to Fasig for selling another tremendous horse who's gone on to have classic success. So there were, as John mentioned, over 2,700 owners of Seize the Grey. They weren't all there. It only just seemed like that. And it's sparked a little bit of conversation on social media. And there has been this conversation in the past about MyRacehorse and their business model, but it really kind of blew up and came to the forefront and heated up because obviously they have had this major success now. And I think there are a lot of people this week probably Googling MyRacehorse and wondering about it because they got a bunch of pops from the NBC people as well after the race. And, it's microshares are a relatively new concept to racing. I think that it's going to grow. There's going to be other microshare syndicates and groups that are going to try to emulate MyRacehorse's success on the racetrack. But I mean, I think there are positives and negatives to it. I think, it's the issue I think that people have with this is like the share for the horse cost $127. You just won the Preakness and the payout is going to be like $178. So like I think a lot of people are questioning like where the money is going. And that was kind of the case with Authentic too. Was Authentic, obviously they owned a smaller piece of him, but he won the Derby, the Breeders' Cup. He's a very popular stallion. And like how much money did the MyRacehorse shareholders get back from that? I don't think it was very much. The flip side of that is people aren't in it for the money. They want to say that they own a small piece of a racehorse that just won the Preakness Stakes. And if that's enough for them, I don't honestly think that you should talk down to people who get enough of a thrill out of that and aren't in it to realize a profit. Like there are plenty of other places in the business that you can go to try to make money. And West Point Partners have been very successful, like the ones with Flightline. You can make real money doing that, which is a major selling point for a lot of people, but not everyone is into the business for that reason. So I don't know. Those are just my overall thoughts. I think there's a lot of nuance here. John, what's your impression?
Well, Joe, I think it all comes down to the way that MyRacehorse markets itself. Okay, they're marketing, in my opinion, they are marketing their opportunities as a way to get involved in racing, a way to own a racehorse, and a way to be involved. Those are all true statements. I think where it veers off is it gives people the illusion that they are going to be participating in purses. They're going to be participating in if the horse syndicates to become a stallion, which obviously now Seize the Grey, will be doing. But in reality, that's not the case. If you read the fine print, you're not going to be participating in stallion ownership. So when the horse gets syndicated and the horse sells for millions and millions of dollars, my understanding, again, I didn't read the specific offering on Seize the Grey, but my understanding from past horses that they've had, past partnerships they've had, is that the stallion ownership is outside of the scope of this ownership. When Spendthrift was heavily involved in putting up the money, they got the majority, they got the lion's share of the benefit, which is why Audible is there, and which is why Audible is flourishing as a stallion prospect there. So if you're coming in as a microshare owner and you expect to be remunerated monetarily, this isn't the group for you. You're not going to see any money. If, however, you want to be in a fan club for the horse, in essence, kind of like I'm a fan club, I'm in the Aerosmith fan club. Okay,
So you just said the Joe Bianca fan club.
Not yet, but it's coming. It's coming, Joe. If you keep showing up on Newsmax, it's right around the corner.
Not Newsmax, News Nation.
Oh, News Nation. I'm sorry. That's why I couldn't find you. Before. Okay. Anyway, but I'm so that does that mean that I'm gonna, as an Aerosmith card carrying member, that I'm gonna fan club member, that I'm gonna be able to have dinner with Steven Tyler? No, it does not mean that. What it means is that I get 10% off of their merchandise. I get preferred seating options for their concerts, and I get an Aerosmith T-shirt. So if they marketed, they being MyRacehorse, if they marketed it as it's a fan club, then I would be a little bit more, a little kinder towards them. But I think they're really trying to like push the envelope and say that you people own the horse. And I guess technically, as a microshare owner, you do own the horse, but you don't have a license. You don't have access to be able to go to the paddock unless you win a lottery. You don't have the ability to talk to the trainer one-on-one like you would if you were in a smaller partnership or owned it outright. So to me, I think that they're really pushing it as far as whether or not it's ownership or if it is indeed a fan club. I would call MyRacehorse a successful fan club of racing with people who have ownership in that fan club, not necessarily ownership in the horse. But it's moot. If you're plunking up $100, $150 to say that you own a microshare in a horse and it excites you, then that's great. More power to you. I'm happy for the 2,700 people in 40 plus states that own a piece of that fan club. And I genuinely hope that it fosters more interest in the industry and that some of them develop and mature into becoming full-fledged owners. But I don't like the idea that MyRacehorse is calling their fans, their investors, owners, because you're not an owner of the horse, really. You're an owner of the entity that owns, it's a fan club for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, when we talked about this, like you would have made a lot more money just betting on Seize the Grey
Exactly.
on Saturday, taking out $127 and betting him at 9-1. You would have made like 5 or 6x what you're going to make from the Preakness. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it's like your mileage may vary situation. Like if this is something that gets you excited and you can tell people you own a small miniature slice of a Preakness winner, God bless. Like, who am I to say you shouldn't feel great about that? And I have seen some like annoying gatekeeping on Twitter about like, well, you're not a real owner. I'm a real owner and this and that. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, just let people have their fun. And if they don't care about getting a return on their investment, then whatever. What does it matter to you? The other thing is, as you mentioned, some people will mature and go to higher levels. Like at West Point, we've had new partners come in who got their feet wet with MyRacehorse just to see what it was like, what ownership, quote unquote, was like. And they want to play at a higher level. So if this is a concept that can introduce new people to racing that would have never gotten into it necessarily before,
Right.
and they continue to spend more and invest more in the business, then I think it's a great thing for the industry. But I tend to agree also with your point that it's not really ownership. Like I think the analogy I always think of is like, how you can like get like a star named after you? It's like you go on the internet and there's like a star somewhere in the galaxy and you can name it after yourself. Like, yes, technically there's a star with your name on it, but you're never going to see it. Like it's never going to be an actual tangible thing for you. So if you want that certificate that says I got a star named Lisa Left Eye Lopez in honor of John's favorite R&B artist of all time, that's great. But it's not the kind of intimate experience that you would get spending your money somewhere else that would give you like more actual tangible return. And that's kind of what I think of with the MyRacehorse concept. It's a fan club. That was another good analogy. And I think there are a lot of benefits in terms of introducing people to the game and lowering the barrier to entry. But yeah, like I understand the reason for the cynicism, at least when the horse won the Preakness and the microshare owners are getting $178 back because the horse $1.2 million for the race, obviously minus $120,000 to Dwayne, $120,000 to Jaime Torres. That's still a boatload of money. And it begs the question, like, where is all that money going to if it's not going back to the quote unquote owners?
Well, for right now, it's all going to the photographer because the track photographer, because you get 2,700 different pictures that you're selling. Joe, I will say just one more thing, and then we can put a bow on this. I feel like that this was really MyRacehorse's true first, grade 1 winner. I know they kind of jumped on the bandwagon for Audible and was it a savvy investment? Yeah. What? Authentic. I'm sorry. What did I say? Audible. I'm sorry. Authentic. Authentic. Was it a savvy investment because the horse did win the Derby? Absolutely. Did they own any piece of it other than just being enough of it to be able to put their name on the program? No, that's really all it was. But they actually went out and they found this horse and they bought him as a yearling again in Fasig-Tipton. They bought him as a yearling, developed and trained him, gave him to the coach to develop and train. And win in Preakness. And that is a really difficult thing to do in the business. So I do tip my cap to them on this one. On the previous one, I was like, they're just fan jumpers, and they're doing the same thing that a lot of other people do, which is, buy a horse once it's already proven at an exorbitant amount of money for a small percentage. They can have their name on the program. And
that's called the Saul Kuman, I think.
You said that, not me. I didn't say it.
I like Saul, and I like Saul a lot, but that's his
model. That's his model. Yeah. Exactly. But this was a difficult thing to do, and MyRacehorse accomplished that. So I give them full credit, because there's only one minted every year. There's only one Preakness winner every year. And they unearthed it and they found it. And for this one, I would definitely be, if I was them, I would definitely be promoting and marketing about the fact that we actually developed and owned a horse all unto ourselves. And he won the Preakness, which again is a milestone.
Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. We are recording this on Tuesday morning, so day one of the Fasig-Tipton Mid-Atlantic sale is in the books. A filly by Bernardini topped the first session at $650,000. The results were pretty much even with last year. A total of 142 horses sold Monday for a gross of $13.162 million. Average was over 92,000. The median was 48.5. So that's pretty much exactly what they sold last year, which I think is good, because earlier in the year the sales results were a little bit down, I think, at OBS. So for Fasig to replicate last year's success is a big deal. But an even bigger deal is that West Point bought 3 horses on Monday. We bought a Good Magic colt, a New York bred filly by Salamini, and I think the big dog of the 3 is the Alternation colt, who's going to be going to the red-hot Cherie DeVoe, who won 3 stakes on Black-Eyed Susan Day at Pimlico. John, I know you guys were interested in this horse as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we know the family really well. It's the family of Jaywalk, who was our first champion, and also of Jayhawk, who was a graded racehorse for us that's coming off the DL and will be running at Woodbine pretty soon. And Joe, honestly, we narrowed our list down for that day to 1 horse, and you guys outbid us on that horse. I didn't know that you guys were going to be interested in an Alternation. And he's an under the radar stallion. We actually were one of the original shareholders of Alternation when he first was syndicated back at Pin Oak, with Mrs. Abercrombie and Clifford Barry, and bred some mares to him for the first 4, 5, 6 years. And he throws a good solid horse. He throws a good solid runner. He doesn't get a lot of mares anymore. But when we saw this horse Breeze, we were just absolutely floored. And it wasn't even so much that he went in 10-1, because he's not a sprinter. He's going to be a 2-turn classic distance kind of horse. And he was well bought, I think, by you guys at what, 250,000, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So I think after the show we may have to talk, because we may still want to be a part of that one. But he's a really nice horse, and again, he was an expensive horse in the sense of for an Alternation, but in the grand scheme of things, the way that the results went yesterday at Fasig, I don't think he cracked the top 10. That's how strong the market was at the top of the market yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the consensus is that the horses that are going to sell later today are an even stronger group than day one. So I expect the numbers to continue to do well. And it's obviously it's great. It's a great sale, obviously, because Fasig-Tipton puts on an awesome show at all the sales. But I think it's also great to get to see these horses run over the dirt, because most of the other 2-year-old sales are on synthetic. So it's nice to see them travel over the dirt, more likely what they're going to be racing on through their career. And it was a safe track. It was an awesome breeze show, and I think the results are going to reflect that. So just real quick, after we conclude the Mid-Atlantic May 2-year-olds in training sale today, we've got another digital sale right around the corner, May 30th through June 4th. Entries close May 22nd. So that's this Wednesday. So if you got horses that you want to put in that sale, do it right now at Fasig-Tipton.com. Now we go back to Timonium for the Mid-Atlantic June 2-year-olds in training sale. And then we turn the page to yearling sales season. And we know Fasig does that better than anybody in the business. So just to wrap up some of the storylines from Preakness weekend, it wasn't just the Preakness Stakes. Gunsong won the Black-Eyed Susan on Friday, the Grade 2 Black-Eyed Susan from Mark Hennig, another really awesome daughter of Gun Runner. He just keeps putting out these great horses, particularly fillies. One of the things that was cool, I thought, about the weekend was that it wasn't a procession, and it's nothing against these guys, but it wasn't a procession of Chad Brown and Todd Pletcher and Bob Baffert and Brad Cox winning every single race. You had a lot of diversity in the trainers that were winning. And special shout out to Cherie DeVoe, who picked up 3 stakes wins on Friday. Oh, he's got to even have a hat. All I do is talk up Cherie. She got to send me one.
Joe, this is how far in advance we were on the Cherie DeVoe bandwagon. Is not only like 2 weeks ago, episode 43, at an hour and 3 minutes through an hour and 5 minutes to be exact, did we give a shout out to Cherie and say, what a credit she was to racing and how well she was doing.
Back in 2018, Paul Manganaro, who's a friend, actually sent Cherie a pyramid of success. Here are the goals that, in the timetable that you should set as your personal goals to try to achieve as a trainer. And they weren't easy. It was like, the first one was, a couple of them was easy. Win a race, win an allowance race, win a graded stake race, and then win a grade 2, grade 3, and then win a grade 1 by 2024. And she did all those things. And to come from, from basically, I don't want to say relatively unknown because she worked for some good programs, but give Cherie DeVoe a lot of credit for being able to work her way up the ladder and to achieve those goals that they preset, but also to continue to manage her racing stable the way she does.
But I actually got this hat a couple of months prior to that even, because she put on Twitter, a request that if anybody sends money to aftercare programs and can show her a receipt of it, that she will send them a Cherie DeVoe hat. So I have one of the original Cherie DeVoe hats from like March or April of this year.
Wow.
And I've been wearing it proudly over the past couple of weeks, especially. But yeah, we were, and you guys at West Point, you guys have been giving horses to Cherie for a long time now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. West Point got in on the ground floor as you did, obviously, with that hat. And if she were a stock, she would have been a great stock to buy because she just keeps getting better and better. And it's not just her. Shout out to Adrian and the rest of the team at the Cherie DeVoe barn. They do a great job. David and Gordo, obviously, behind the scenes helping pick out a lot of those horses. But yeah, so Cherie won 3. You had Mike Trombetta winning the very one on Friday. Like I said, Mark Hennig winning the Black Eyed Susan. On Saturday, spacing on his first name, but B. Creighton won the Chick Lang with Frost Free. It was a very nice horse. So apologies to Mr. Creighton that I don't have his first name at hand. But yeah, he got a win. Arno Delacour, who we also love at West Point, got a win with Fulmineo in the James Murphy, Jorge Duarte. So there were a lot of trainers that don't have 200 horses who were picking up major wins over the weekend at Pimlico on Preakness weekend. So that's an awesome feat for all of them, especially Cherie for that 3-bagger. And then, John, there was a little bit of appreciation for a north of the border legend this weekend as well.
There was, and I'm proud to use him all the time. This is Patrick Husbands, who they actually had a Patrick Husbands Day at Woodbine. And of course, what does he do on his own day? He rides 3 horses to get 2 wins and a third, including a win in a stake race. In his native Barbados, he's known as the Prime Minister because he's just so well known down there. Joe, he's 50 plus years old and he's still riding. I'm 54, and after 2 hours of pickleball, I can't get off my fat ass off the couch. So I can't imagine how he's still riding. But he's an 8-time Sovereign Award winner as the best jockey. He's got a lifetime win percentage of 20%, over 50% in the money, 370 North American stake winners, 370 North American stake wins. I mean, let that kind of seep in to your mindset. And over 3,600 victories in his extensive and lengthy career. So I'm glad that to be able to point out a couple of people, like you said, that are under the radar, whether it's Patrick Husbands up in Canada, Mark Henning, who, going into that race of the Black Eyed Susan had an 8% win percentage this year. So it was a little rough go for him this year, but that'll definitely pick up their spirits. We didn't mention the fact that horse actually, Gunsong, we were on that horse. Kim Valerio, who does some shortlisting for us, actually really loved Gunsong, and we weren't smart enough to be able to bid $410, nor do we have the deep pockets to be able to do it. But $400,000 was a really good looking purchase now for the daughter of Gun Runner. And then you mentioned Cherie winning 3 stake races that day. Joe, this is kind of an odd stat, but she won 3 stake races that day with 3 different jockeys. I mean, usually, the trainer-jockey marriage is pretty monogamous. But Paco Lopez won the DuPont Distaff. Johnny V won the Hilltop. And then Brian Hernandez won the Grade 3 Pimlico Special. So spreading the wealth, spreading the love, which is what we're doing here on this show. And I think there were a lot of unsung heroes that hopefully will get some additional notoriety, well-deserved notoriety, after this weekend.
Pretty exciting horses too. Like Pyrenees is kind of an emerging handicap division talent. She Feels Pretty was a grade 1 winner last year. She blew that field apart in the Hilltops. So she kind of looks like the boss bitch in the 3-year-old turf filly division right now. And Shotgun Hottie was much the best. And she's another one that, maybe she's not on Adiamatic's level just yet, but she got a 98 buyer. So she is not far off of the tops in her division as well. And yeah, shout out to Patrick Husbands and Mark Cassey. You talked about like the monogamous jockey trainer relationship. Those two guys have dominated Woodbine for years and years and years. So it's great to see him getting the recognition he deserves. And especially, and speaking of recognition, Brett Creighton.
Brett. I was going to say Brad. You were right.
Yeah,
Brett.
I didn't want to get it wrong, but now after 1,346 starts, Brett Creighton has his first graded stakes winner. So shout out to Brett. Sorry I didn't get your name the first time, but I'm sure you're still on a high from the weekend that you don't give a shit that some podcast host didn't know your first name.
He's going to call you Jake Bianca.
Yeah,
Jake Bianca was talking good stuff about me on that podcast.
Jake Bianca and Jim Green.
I've been called worse.
Trusty hosts of Rail Talk. So yeah, feel good weekend, I think, with a lot of smaller and mid-level outfits getting big successes, which we always love to see. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. For almost 50 years, TaylorMade's put customers first as a thoroughbred consignor, working to optimize the path to success at the breeding stock, yearling, and horses of racing age sales. They got records set on the racetrack and in the sales ring, and they've positioned themselves as the worldwide leading consignor in thoroughbred sales and marketing, particularly at the yearling sales. And as I mentioned before in the Fasig spot, we're right around the corner from yearling sales season. It'll kick off in earnest with the Fasig July sale down at Newtown Paddocks in Lexington, and then motor right through the Fasig-Tipton New York bred and select sale, and then Keeneland September. You got to expect TaylorMade to be, if not the leading consignor, near the top of that list for every single one of those sales. But it's not just yearlings. They do a great job with the digital sales as well, as we saw with Mensa recently for our buddies at DJ Stable. And there's plenty of digital sales on the Fasig platform that TaylorMade will set up. They'll set your horse up for success. They treat their clients like their family. They make every horse the most important horse at that moment, and that's how they realize the best results for all of their clients. Hit them up, TaylorMadeFarm.com, and do it soon. Like I said, those yearling sales are going to start before you know it. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 45 of Rail Talk. 50 episodes right around the corner, John. Cannot wait and excited to keep building this thing with you. Shout out to Jon Green for going back and forth with me as always. Shout out to our sit-in producer, Julia Agresta. Talk about meteoric rises. We're talking about Cherie. Julia Agresta is now in the big chair just for today. Our absent goddess, Patty Wolf, will be back for the next show. Shout out to our associate producer, Nathan Wilkinson. And thanks to you, the viewers and the listeners, for watching. As always, no show next week. We'll be off for Memorial Day. Enjoy the holiday weekend. We'll be back the week after that. And as always, thanks for tuning in here on Rail Talk.